Hello.
Hello.
I don't know why I'm saying it to you. These are the people watching. Okay, so this is the NoDDCast. We are here to talk about role-playing and related gubbins. My name is Nova.
I'm Connor.
And we are... Honestly, we're role-playing addicts.
Basically, yeah.
I've been involved in at least... There's been times in my life when I've been in 4 or 5 games a week.
Listen, how many levels of RPG are you on right now? I've done 6 in one week.
Oh, Lord. It's okay, though. We can give up any time we want.
Absolutely. I was in the same game 4 times over once.
I also don't need any dice right now. I'm fine.
We're fine.
So, for those of you that don't know what NoDDsoc is, you might have had a clue from the fact we were talking about role-playing a lot. NoDDsoc is the Sheffield Role-Playing Society, stands for Not Only Dungeons and Dragons Society, hence the unusual name. And yeah, we're putting out a podcast about role-playing, I guess. The main thing we wanted to start with this evening is who are we and why should you listen to us? We've already introduced ourselves by name. Do you want to talk about where you come role-playing wise?
I've been doing role-playing for about 4 or 5 years. I started out with Pathfinder because apparently everyone starts with Pathfinder.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
I'll get onto mine in a minute.
Yeah. And then the second ever game I played, I ended up GMing Scion, which, if you don't know, it's a White Wolf buckets of D10 game where it just expands exponentially and to ridiculous levels where you end up killing gods using ancient cruise liners as baseball bats.
Bearing in mind that there is also the outside chance that you might kill the GM with the bucket of dice you're throwing.
Yeah.
It's not happened in my presence, but apparently rumours say.
But yeah, I've been doing that for about 4 or 5 years, but that sort of pales in comparison to your experience.
This is why you make me feel old, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
You're doing it on purpose, aren't you?
Yeah. Like, okay. I'm 23 and you're like, what, 404? Something like that?
I can murder him later, right?
That's the thing we're allowed to do, apparently not.
Okay, apparently I'm not allowed to murder him. No, I started role-playing when I was 11, and that was 26 years ago? No, 24 years ago. I can math. So yeah, I started role-playing in 90-something. And the first game I ever played was a 2nd edition D&D, where I played a druid and did very little, and then tried to cast a spell and got murdered. Those were the days.
Sounds about right.
I mean, it wasn't quite as bad as when, you could role-play and you could level as an elf or a warrior or a ranger, back when elf was a class instead of a race, because apparently that was the thing. I've also been running games at NoDDsoc periodically for about 10 years now. I've run systemless stuff. I've run a lot of Warhammer 40k, actually. I've run about 6 games of Dark Heresy and 1 systemless game that used the universe, because why the hell not? High politics is fun. And yeah, I've also played a lot of Pathfinder, including one where we saved the world and then one of the other player characters broke it.
Yeah, we broke it hard.
Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate it.
So this sort of episode, we're going to be talking about setting out on the course of GMing and what sort of things you can expect from players and sort of level of preparation you need to put into each session.
Bear in mind that there are multiple schools of thought on how this works, so we may not be able to go into massive depth on any one specific thing, but we should be able to give people enough of a taster of what they should be expecting, that they can just have a go. So,
I mean, the first thing to bear in mind as a GM is that whatever you think is going to happen isn't. If you've gone to GMing from being a player, you will know firsthand that you just make stuff up, and you'll probably see the GM do this face a few times. Yep. Mm-hmm.
GMs don't like to say no, but occasionally they really want to.
So, the first thing to bear in mind is players suck, but in a good way. Mm-hmm. They will take your carefully crafted plot line that's going to span multiple sessions, and in the first 10 minutes they'll walk the opposite direction and just off into the wild world to continue their adventures in some other town. A
good example of this that I remember hearing once was a D&D game of some description, I forget exactly which, where the plot was the world was about to end, the big bad, and at some point during the thing, the characters had to go through this theatre, this old, dilapidated, run-down, not making any money theatre, and apparently the GM did too good a job of describing the place because the players went, wait, how much? We've got enough money to buy this place, haven't we? Could we save the theatre? Is that a thing we can do? And the GM probably pulled that face and went, yes, we're buying the theatre. And the GM had to go away and go, okay, we'll shelve this plot for now. How do I... Okay, so you're going to have to deal with the prima donna, the instruments are awful, you've got no money, people hate your shows. Okay, here is plot. Are you going to engage with this one? Oh, good. But that is the sort of thing that can happen. Players will just go off in random directions. Another thing that can happen is that they will kill important NPCs. You know that person who was secretly the big bad all along? The players will kill them by accident.
Yeah.
So many times.
Or you'll engineer an amazing, wonderful escape from an underground dwarven stronghold, and they'll have stolen whatever it is they've gone in to steal, and there'll be guards chasing them, and they'll be fleeing the exit, and they can distantly in the background see the dwarven monarch going, ah, and that one ranger will turn around and go, I'm going to shoot the queen. And they will kill the queen of all the dwarves and ruin everything. That's never happened to me.
It's okay, we've all been there. The thing to bear in mind, however, is that a lot of the time if this happens to you, don't panic. The players probably don't realize what they've done.
Yeah.
In the example where the players decided to change the plot altogether, that required some work, and that's fine, but it can still work, and you can still get a lot of pleasure out of giving them what they want.
Yeah.
In terms of killing someone important, if the players don't realize how important that person was, it wasn't them.
Yeah.
It was their twin brother who came over from the next continent over that you've never heard of before because it wasn't important until just now.
Or they're a massively powerful wizard who can just come back from the dead anyway, anytime they want. So it really doesn't matter that you killed them accidentally.
In fact, go to Marvel for inspiration. People have heard the joke about Magneto, but it wasn't Magneto, it was Magneto pretending to be Zorn, pretending to be a Skrull, pretending to be Magneto.
Who was actually a Doombot.
Exactly. You see how it goes. You can always back that sort of thing up, but be aware it can happen and it's not even always malicious. I don't think. The preparation that you need to put into a role-playing game, as far as I'm concerned, depends on how you want to run it. The way I run role-playing games is I turn up and things happen.
Yeah.
That's when I'm running them, not when I'm playing. Like, I turn up and I go, what would be cool now? Okay, that happens. And it means that combat encounters are interesting because I have to make them up on the fly, but it can be done, and if that's the sort of style you want to go with, that's fine, that's how you do it. And you have to understand that that's okay. You can do on-the-spot prep, you can do on-the-spot making stuff up. And as long as the players don't see too many cracks, they will assume that everything is fine and that this was all part of the plan.
I tend to put a lot more preparation into being a player than I do being a GM, but like you still obviously need some preparation. You can't just go in like, here's a bunch of characters and stuff is going to happen. You have to have some sort of grounding, some sort of basis for them to work off. The most effective strategy that I found is to sort of have a vague idea of the world and have the players build their characters within that world, and they all have these other little threads, and they can just chase whichever one of these little threads they want at any given moment. So, for example, if they go, right, we've ruined your main plot in the first session, they've still got plenty of other little stuff to be messing around with while you fix what they just broke.
Or while you make the thread that they've just picked up into the big plot to start with.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where like there's a lot of schools of thought on how to run a role-playing game. There's a lot of schools of thought on how to... And this is something we might get into later on, into sort of the gamer narrativist strategist triangle. And how there's a lot of sort of game theory that goes into this sort of thing, and I don't even care about it when I run games, but there is something to be said for it. And we will get into that later.
But that sort of strategy of like having a web of stuff that people can pick up is something that's really helpful for bringing like together a lot of characters from really disparate backgrounds, like. So, for example, you just give your players complete freedom. They can create whatever character they want to. So you've got an ex-gladiator fighter who's looking to redeem himself, and you've got this big barbarian mercenary from the north, and then you've got some of the like random characters thrown in who otherwise would have no reason to work together. With those little threads that they've got, you can link those threads together and give them a reason to work together.
A common adversary is often a good idea for this one, because if you can give them someone that they all hate, then they'll work together against that person. And again, it depends on the context, but that's usually just a fairly sound strat. Give them something that they have in common and something to hate, and they will go in basically the direction you want them to go at that point, I think.
Another thing to bear in mind with that is, like, I've completely lost my train of thought there. Never mind. Oh well.
Okay.
Oh yeah, no. So don't be afraid to say no to your players. Don't be afraid to go, right, this is the character I want you to create. You've got freedom, but it's the freedom is within this framework. So the first game I ever played was you are a wandering adventurer who has decided to settle down in the city and join an adventurers guild. So that was the sort of thing binding us all together as players. We were in this little adventuring guild, and that's where we came across the main plot.
There's also a famous example of a Dark Heresy game for Warhammer 40k, for those that don't know, where all of the players started out as guardsmen.
Oh, the all guardsman party thing, yeah.
The thing is, they had to start out by creating a lot of guardsmen because most of the characters they made didn't make it through the first hour of the first session, let alone the first session. But they were given that constraint of, you are all guardsmen. Within that, you can be anything you want, but you have to be on the front lines. You're going to be there. You're part of the Imperial Guard. That's your brief, and that's fine too. I mean, I've also played in games of D&D where gnomes don't exist, so you can't be a gnome. Or halflings don't exist, and then you may come across small doors at various points. No, halflings don't exist. You can't be a halfling. There was plot behind that, but that's a long story.
Yeah. But it's like, don't be afraid to say, if a player comes to you with a character that's wildly out of anything that you wanted to do with that, don't be afraid to go, actually, can we just work on that a little bit? Another thing to do that I found really, really effective recently is to do like origin stories or session zeros where if your characters are all wildly different, take their little threads and work with them one-on-one first to get them into a situation where they're going to meet the other player characters. So that you've then got a little basis for them all to be together and be working together towards the same thing. Use NPCs as, I don't want to say railroading, because railroading is, it's awkward and uncomfortable, but like, use the NPCs to sort of direct your players where you want them to go. Like, we've got a quest where you have to go to this city and do something. Have like a shady NPC meets them at the gate and gives them some secret information, and that sort of pushes them into another sort of.
Another thing you can do is you can have get the players to work each other's backstories out and work themselves into somebody else's backstory. I believe there is a system which does this deliberately. I think it's one of the Fate systems where every single character passes their character sheet to the left, and you write a little bit on their character sheet about how you already know them. I think that's probably going to have to do for today, to be honest. Well,
first we're going to sort of throw it over to a little like pre-recorded thing that I did with Rob earlier, where we're going to do some GM questions, sort of answering some problems that have been put to us by NoDDSoc and giving some advice to sort of do with that.
Yeah, sounds good. We'll see you in a minute.
We'll just cut to that. So this is Rob, and he's going to be doing the GM questions for the week.
Hello, I'm the third white male in this situation.
We're a very inclusive podcast.
We're a very inclusive podcast.
So the first question we've got is, what can you do to help keep a sort of campaign, multi-session scenario flowing when your players aren't always available week to week?
It is a difficult one. Most of the time, you can just have the character fade into the background, I find. Whatever they're doing, they can just be off doing something that their character would be doing. So if they've got something to investigate, if the players are investigating something, then they can be off investigating another lead. The difficulty comes when you're in a situation where you can't do that. So if you're in the middle of a dungeon crawl, it doesn't make sense for the player to just disappear. Unless you're playing Pathfinder, in which there is an item for that. There's a whole host of metagamey items.
Go on.
There's a whole host of metagamey items, one of which is like a scar that can just cause the character to wink out of existence temporarily. Yeah. That.
I mean, when the first sort of Pathfinder game I ran, when we lost people in the middle of a dungeon crawl, we like one of the items our GM gave us was the I can't remember exactly what he called it, but it was a knapsack that players could climb in and out of, and there was a tavern in the knapsack, and just kept.
Yeah.
We weren't allowed to use the tavern in the knapsack for anything other than like players who weren't there.
Yeah. That is a very metagamey solution, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
The easy solution there is to always have somebody else with a copy of that player's character sheet.
Yes.
So even if that character doesn't say anything or partake, they can still be there when they logically would be there. However, I would say for that, don't kill the player when they're not there.
The difficulty comes when it gets to a combat.
Yeah. Don't kill the player when they're not there. That's what's generally considered a dick move.
We have done that before.
Yeah. It's not fair to them. They don't have any control. Yeah. It removes the sense of player agency, which is a thing that you should always focus on and allow them to do. Of course, then the whole what happens if there's a TPK scenario comes on, in which case it's actually a useful thing. You can have that player escape.
Yeah.
And then that player can be the vector for
continuing the plot.
Continuing the campaign.
Yeah.
If he's there and there's a TPK, well, sucks. But when they're not there, it's very useful actually.
What are your thoughts on like play-by-post stuff? Like, you've got the player at the other end of a Facebook message. Like they're not in the session because they're off busy doing something else, but they can still message you what they want to be doing.
It's difficult because it interrupts the flow of the game.
Yeah.
Normally, you can't react in the same way that you would normally. That's why things like Skype are very good.
Yeah.
If you have a laptop available, you can just Skype a player in. Again, there is always a bit of a lag there, which can disrupt the flow. Play by post, it's awkward. I often feel.
Yeah.
I think you'd probably just be better off saying we'll leave it for this session, and then you can be caught up, because you want the game to continue flowing. You don't want it to be interrupted every minute by, oh, that guy said this ages ago, the message has only just come through.
Or you're sitting there in a combat going, it's this guy's turn, we've got to wait for them to reply. So
you can't wait for that and interrupt the flow of the game. You know, we always have limited time to play. Yeah. You don't want to eat that up just sat around doing that.
So the best thing to do is just have the player like sort of fade into the background if possible.
The background. I think fade into the background is generally the best solution.
Yeah.
If there's an easy way of getting rid of them, so like I said, off investigating something, off drinking at a tavern, off.
Yeah, and then you can, if necessary, you could have a solo session with that player
to catch them up and give them something.
That way, they've actually still got some involvement in the story, even though they didn't make the main session.
Yeah.
So the second question we've got is, how do I deal with a player who keeps dragging the game down to a crawl with rules questioning and second-guessing the quick rulings that are put in place to keep the game flowing along? So sort of how do you deal with rules lawyers?
I think the first thing you need to establish is kind of why they're asking the questions. Yeah. There could be a multitude of reasons. If they are just a new player, they could be asking those questions just to learn the system. Especially if they're questioning the quick rulings you put in place to keep the game flowing. Yeah. They might want to know what the actual rule is for future reference. Yeah. Which is good. The player wants to know the system they're playing. But generally, I think you could probably be able to see the attitude difference with a person asking in that kind of situation, as opposed to someone who is rules lawyering.
Yeah, which so it's more of a sort of, actually, I don't quite understand what you've done there. Can you sort of...
Yeah. Rules lawyering, however, obviously, most of us have come up against a rules lawyer in our time when we've been playing or GMing. Somebody who either feels they know the system better than the GM, or actually does know the system better than GM. Whether that's because you need to kind of establish why they're doing it. Is it because they want the power? Yeah. In which case, maybe suggest that they should GM themselves and get a bit of empathy for the situation of GMing. GMing is kind of it's quite pressurized. I've often found you kind of in the middle of combat you can just forget a rule that you've been asked 12 billion times. Yeah. And just say, okay, we'll do it this way for now. In that scenario, it can be useful to have a rules lawyer. You can kind of turn them into your ally. Say, how does this work? I've forgotten. Yeah. And that kind of deals with the problem in a kind of a roundabout way.
Especially if you're GMing a new system, I find it's good to have at least one or two players who have played the system before, so that they know. Like, if you have got a question, like one of my regular groups has a player in it who he forgets rules quite a lot. So when I mean, like every time we have a combat, he has to ask how one of his abilities work because he keeps forgetting. And if it's a new system that you as the GM, you're not super confident on everything in the system, but you've got those rules lawyers to go, right, it's this.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
And that kind of channels it in a helpful way. Some people, they can just do it for the power trip or to just get in the way, in which case you kind of need to always pull them aside.
Yeah.
Don't be confrontational. That never helps anyone because it puts people on the defensive. They feel like they're being personally attacked.
Yeah.
That's not what you want someone to feel, especially when you're just trying to solve a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Pull them aside. Say, look, this is getting in the way. Everyone, this is a team game. It's a group game.
Yeah.
Everyone's there to have fun, and if somebody is spoiling the fun for people, then you need to address that. Some people might not even be aware they're doing it.
Yeah.
You know, people are kind of oblivious to their own faults a lot of the time.
True.
You know, so you just need to just make them aware. Be kind. Be constructive.
Yeah.
Don't be confrontational. With regards to the second guessing the rules you put in place to keep the game flowing, you kind of want to just say, like, I know you might have a problem with it, but can we just deal with it for now? We'll discuss it after the game.
Yeah.
This is how we're going to play it for now. We'll leave it.
Because nothing, like, if it's a combat, say, like, nothing breaks up the flow of a game quite like somebody going, oh, hang on, let me just look through this book, find the rules on grappling for 20 minutes while we sit here and wait like idiots.
Yeah. Yeah, it breaks up the flow game, it ruins it, it spoils everyone's fun.
Yeah.
Everyone's there to have fun. Remember, you're there to have fun as well. You're a GM. It's not just about the players, you're part of it as well.
Yes.
And that's it. What was the other thing I was going to say? No, can't remember. Anyway.
So, would it be helpful if you were put in quite a few quick rulings during the session? Do you think it'd be helpful to sort of at the end of the session sort of sit everybody down and go, right, what did you think to these rules that were just...
that is a good idea. You can have them sat down and just say, well, and then look at the real ruling.
Yeah.
Or if there is a real ruling, many systems are notorious for being silent on very important subjects like the mounted combat rolls in Pathfinder are a mess.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. But there's a lot of stuff where it's just players
around it.
Players going to do this, but there's not really a rule in the system for this, so we'll stick a quick rule in on it, a house rule or whatever. And plus, I think that might help to sort of refine those quick rulings if it is something that there's not a rule for in the system, like discussing it with people and saying, do you think this worked? What do you think could make it work better if it didn't? You know, that sort of just be open with your players and discuss it after the game.
And as well, I think if you do that, write the ruling down at the end, so you can be consistent in future. Otherwise, players could feel a bit like, it worked that way last time. Why doesn't it work that way this time?
So our next question is, how do I deal with a player who keeps getting into fights with other party members because it's their character's personality?
It's another one you kind of need to see why they're doing it. Is it affecting the other players adversely? Is it a role-playing thing? If it's a role-playing thing, then generally it's fine. You know, if there's a reason for it. If it's just being a dick and randomly stabbing your mates, then that's the problem. Yeah. There are a couple of ways to sort it. First of all, as always, talk to them like an adult. Yeah. Don't be confrontational. Pull them aside. Say, look, you're being a bit of a problem. Well, don't say you're being a bit of a problem. Yeah. Say this is a bit disruptive.
That sort of thing. Like nicer words. Yeah.
The other option, which is kind of you need to talk to the players about this, is it disrupting their fun? In which case, you need to kind of deal with it in character. It's a team game, but you're also playing characters, and they're supposed to be working as a team. If somebody is not being a team player, why should those characters continue playing with, traveling with this person? There's no reason for them. If he is just a problem, or she, it could, you know, the players, the characters are well within their rights to go, no, why are we hanging around with this person? This person is a problem.
And I've been in all those different scenarios. I've been the player that started the fights. I've been the person that's gone, actually, no, we're leaving this character behind. And a lot of the time, I find that if it is just a character fight issue, sometimes it does help to just kind of let it play out, because a lot of the better players don't want to create a massively disrupting fight that's going to ruin the whole game. So they will sort of wrangle their characters into a compromise, or they'll end the fight before it becomes lethal.
Again, it is a thing about, is it being disruptive? If the players are fine with it, and that's the game they want to play, let them continue. It's when it starts becoming a problem. If they don't want it, if they didn't sign up for a PvP game, they wanted to play a story.
Yeah.
If it's a story element, that's also fine. You just need to gauge kind of how it's influencing your game. If it's a negative effect, then you need to deal with it. If it's a positive effect, then as long as it doesn't disrupt what everyone's going to do or wants to do, then that's fine.
So, to sort of summarise, if the problem is coming from your typical chaotic neutral lone wolf, I'm going to do things my way and everyone else be damned kind of character, then that's where it can become a problem. But if it's two players who are just really getting into the characters and they've had a bit of a clash, then sometimes it's best. As long as
everyone knows it's in character, it's not a personal attack.
Yes.
People get very invested in their characters.
Yes.
And sometimes you need to step back, and it is just a game.
Yeah.
You don't need to.
If you've had that,
this is not an attack on you.
Yeah.
It's our characters clashing.
If you've had that sort of thing, so like just have a sit down, have a cup of tea, and chat about what happened, and make sure there's no bad blood between the two players.
Yeah. So
the last question we've got is: should I TPK the party because they took a nap outside the final dungeon?
I think so. Not out of any malicious sense. I think I feel like part of the role of the GM is as a teacher.
Yes.
And as part of that, the players need to learn not to do stupid things.
Yes.
And in the situation where they're taking a nap outside the final dungeon, if they're being stupid about it, then they should be punished for it.
Yeah. So if they've just gone, oh well, I guess this is the final dungeon, closed door, nap, that's their fault.
Yeah. If they put someone on guard, then maybe give them a chance to spot whatever's coming. And you have to kind of gauge why they're doing it. If they're just doing it so like, oh, we need all our resources and things.
Yeah,
so
we'll take a short rest to get all our stuff back.
Then I would maybe punish them a bit for it. I know punishment is kind of a bad word almost, but you kind of need to teach them that
actions have consequences.
Yeah, actions have consequences, and it's not a video game. In a lot of video games, a lot of people come to role playing from video games. Yeah, where you can rest without consequence. Some of the older video games, if you rested in a hostile area, you got attacked. Yeah. So
stuff like Fallout straight up won't let you go to sleep if there are any enemies within your radius.
Exactly. So, but when you come to a role playing game, you're kind of trying to create a more living world. Yeah. And as part of that, players need to realise that things aren't just mechanics. Yes. A big part of it is the role playing and the thing. So, a bunch of people wouldn't necessarily go, "Oh, we're going to assault this dungeon. Let's rest." They would need to go, "We need to assault this dungeon now because the Dreadlord is about to escape," or
we're on it. There's the difference between the RP, the tabletop RP. We're on a time frame versus the video game. We're on a time frame, which is you've got theoretically forever.
Yeah, Alduin will sit.
Yeah, he'll sit up there on his roost until you come and poke him. But in this world, he's not going to do that.
No, he's going to go, "I've got plans. They're going into play now, just when you're not expecting it." But I think that's what players need to learn. Yeah. I don't think you should just let them get away with it in a gaming sort of video game kind of sense.
But insofar as TPKing an entire party because of a dumb decision goes, I think that feeds into a slightly larger problem of players versus GMs, which is a whole topic for another time.
Yeah, This week we're dealing with player problems. Perhaps next week we'll deal with GM problems. We'll do a nice counterpoint. Yes. There we go.
But yes, find out why they're doing it, and then if you think that the decision they've made is dumb enough to merit massive retribution, then go for it. But never set out to TPK.
Yeah, never. Yeah.
If you set out to, like, there are ways that you can just, it's the rocks fall, everyone dies sort of thing. If you're gonna do a TPK, it has to feel like a natural response from the world.
Yeah, not the GM's decided that he's gonna kill you. Remember, GMs hold absolute power. If they wanted to kill you, they could.
Yeah. But they shouldn't want to.
They shouldn't want to. The GM is there to enable the game, not to be an adversary to the players.
Yes.
And that's it for this week's edition of GM Questions. If you want to send in questions for our next episode to be answered, please send them to nodsoc@sheffield.ac.uk, appearing here through the power of editorial magic. And we'll see you next episode. Bye.
Okay, that was pretty good. Unfortunately, we are going to have to cut things short at the moment. Building security is about to kick us out, possibly with sharp knives. We were going to take a moment to talk about the Big Bang Theory, but unfortunately there isn't time, so that might have to happen next week. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.